Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. My name is Bodie, and I am your host. And on today's episode, we are going to just talk about EV news. On Friday's episode, we are going to pretty much keep it to Tesla news, but we had 3 full episodes of Tesla. I'm sure everybody would like a break from Elon and the beast that is Tesla. A couple weeks ago, I did an interview with Jason Marks and Forrest North of Tello Trucks. That has been a wildly popular interview, but if you haven't heard it yet, may I suggest to you, go over to podfeet.com, click on No Silicast right on the front page there, and listen to episode 999, because Allison Sheridan is actually replaying that interview on her podcast. So go over there, show Allison and the No Silly Castaways some love. And while you're there, subscribe to her podcast. I promise you will not be disappointed. And the next episode for Allison is episode 1000, which is a huge feat when you consider that Allison actually started this podcast we'll say 1,000 episodes ago, and has not missed a week in the entire time she's been doing the show. That's a very impressive feat. So congratulations to Allison and her husband and producer, Steve. I'm very proud of you, and enjoy your well-deserved break with your family in Hawaii. And I will stick to this 113 to 117 weather here in Arizona that is absolutely miserable. And in case you're wondering, no, I am not bitter. I'm happy for them. I'm just sad for me. All right, let's move into our EV news. NIO has launched the EL8 SUV in Europe, which is the same vehicle as the ES8, which is their flagship vehicle. I did not know this because I was like, oh, the EL8, I don't think I've ever heard of that before. But with NIO vehicles, if it has an S, it's the version meant for China, and if it has an L, it's the version meant for Europe. If you're unfamiliar with the EL8, let's go over some specs. It'll seat 6 people. It will go from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 4.1 seconds. That's 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds. 400 volt architecture, 100 kilowatt hour battery. He's got a range around 420 kilometers, which is about 260 miles, which honestly isn't great range when you consider this is a €100,000 vehicle or $107,000 vehicle. That is not cheap. It's pretty expensive. But NIO vehicles do have access to these battery swap stations, and NIO just launched the Power Swap Station 4.0. And it will swap out a depleted battery pack with a freshly charged battery pack in 144 seconds, which is pretty darn speedy. In other NIO news, the company is expected to hit their stated Q2 delivery goal of 54,000 vehicles. In May alone, they delivered 20,500 vehicles. All right, let's move on to Ford and their shattered Model E dreams. Ford has shuttered the Model E dealer certification program. It will actually officially shutter on July 1st. Back in 2022, Ford announced that if dealers wanted to sell EVs, then they needed to do a few things to get certified as Model E dealers. So if you wanted to be, just a regular Joe Blow and not sell EVs, then great. You didn't have to participate in this at all. If you wanted to sell some EVs, you didn't get priority on which EVs you got. You could become a Model E certified dealer. And to do this, you needed to install one DC fast charger, which would be available to the public. And initially, there was a cap on how many EVs you could sell in total. The dealers pushed back on this, and Ford actually removed that cap. If you wanted to be a Model E certified elite dealer, then you needed to install 2 DC fast charging stations, chargers, not stations. At least one of those needed to be available for public use. You also had to install a level 2 charger, at least one of them, and there were no sales cap for the elites. And you got a better selection of EVs. Ford also wanted to make the purchasing process better for the customers. So if a dealer got in a Ford Mach-E and they wanted to sell it for $30,000 and another dealer wanted to sell it for $100,000, both of those dealers had to put that price on Ford's website. And then the customer could go on Ford's website and be like, I'd rather drive an extra 45 miles out of my way and pay for the one that's $30,000 than the one that's $100,000. So they had to be transparent about their prices, and there was no haggling. That was the price that you paid. The customer could do everything through Ford's website, which included home delivery. So it was a good deal for the customers, maybe not a good deal for the dealers overall. But this is all moot because Ford is canceling the program. We got one more Ford story here. CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, says the company is close to achieving level 3 driving, which would allow drivers to take their hands and eyes off the road while being able and ready to take over if there is a problem. As of this recording, Tesla, even full self-driving, is still technically a level 2. Now, that does not mean that just because they're at a level 2, all level 2 autonomous driving systems are equal. Tesla's is actually quite good, but they're not quite to the level 3 part yet. They could be. I fully believe that Tesla could be at level 3 if they wanted to. But Tesla is like, I'm going to solve this for level 5, and I'm going to skip past level 3 and level 4, which I think may be a mistake. But that's neither here nor there. They are technically level 2. Ford's BlueCruise is also technically level 2. Mercedes does have some level 3 driving in certain states on certain roads that you can activate this. But I'm pretty sure that the Mercedes autonomous driving at level 3 just can't be done everywhere. There was like some places in Nevada and just outside of LA freeway driving where people could who own those vehicles could use level 3 autonomy. As far as Ford goes, we should expect level 3 BlueCruise sometime in 2026. All right, I talk a lot about unions, and I'm very pro-union on this show, and some of you agree with me, and some of you don't. Well, here is a story that isn't so pro-union. UAW President, United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain is under investigation for allegations of retaliating against other union leaders. The UAW Secretary/Treasurer alleges that Fain retaliated against them because certain expenditures for the president's office were not approved. In addition to that, there are some other alleged acts that the government is looking into. This is not the first time union leadership has been accused or has actually been convicted of doing something that was corrupt. So, I'm not blind to that fact, and that's why we're talking about the story here. But I do want to point out, because I don't want to get sued or my union card taken away, at this point, this is only an investigation, and I will keep you posted. Let's talk about GM and their union contract. GM's Ultium battery plant has ratified a UAW contract, and everybody is getting a very generous pay increase. GM was initially paying around $15 an hour as a starting wage at that battery plant. Now, after the contract has been signed, over the next few years of the contract, employees will see their wages increase from whatever they are at the moment, all the way up to $35 to $40 an hour. With the contract does come a better overtime policy, more paid days off, and union health and safety reps in the plant to make sure everybody is safe. One more GM story here. GM's self-driving unit, Cruise, was given the maximum fine for an accident in San Francisco where an autonomous vehicle actually struck a pedestrian and then drugged that pedestrian a number of feet. So not a pleasant experience if you're the pedestrian, for sure. The California DMV reported that Cruise misrepresented, delayed, and omitted certain details when asked about the incident. The maximum fine here, $112,500. Not very much. That is pocket change for GM. but I'm sure there will be a civil suit, and that will that number will be much higher. Okie doke. We have one more EV story, but before we get to that, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to adjust my mic because I feel like maybe I'm too far away from my mic and I sound a little bit hollow. I realize I'm 10 minutes into this, so I apologize if the quality hasn't been what you expect. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about our Patreon, patreon.com/kilowatt or supportkilowatt.com. Did you know that you could actually go to the Patreon and sign up? And every now and again, I just drop random episodes into the free tier. So you can sign up for the free tier and still get ad-free episodes every now and again. It's not every episode. I wouldn't rely on it. I wouldn't rely on it if you want to listen to to every episode of this show, because I think the only ones you'll see are the free ones. But if every now and again you're okay with listening on the Patreon app or on the website, and you wouldn't mind not having the episodes, you can go over and sign up. And of course, you can always pay as little as $1 and get all of those ads taken away, which honestly, if I'm being honest, that was not the best business decision when I set the price for $1. It was probably that was poor planning on my part, simply because Patreon takes their fees. There's not much left of that $1 in the end, and that's okay. The overall goal of the Patreon for this show is not to make money as much as it is to offset the costs of doing the show. So all of the money that goes in, if you do choose to sign up and be a paying patron, all of the money that goes into the show from you goes back to the show. That's probably not the best. All the money that you contribute goes back to the show. That's probably a better way to put it. You can also, if you don't like Patreon, you can sign up to our Acast Plus feed, which there's a link in the show notes. You don't get quite as many features as you do with the Patreon. Like in Patreon now, we have a community tab, which, if I'm being honest, I like more than Discord or Slack. So if you are already a Patreon member, you can go into the community tab and we can chat there as well as a group. And having said all that, let's go ahead and move on to our final story, which is all about Rivian. Rivian is doing yet another round of layoffs. And this round of layoffs, like the last round, is salary workers. As a matter of fact, this is so similar to the last round of layoffs that I thought it was a repeat story that I didn't clean out of my news queue. But nope, this is a recent story. We don't know actually how many people will be laid off, only that they are salaried workers and not hourly workers. In the last year, not calendar year, but year total, Rivian has had several layoffs. I think the number is 3, but it might be 4. So hopefully Rivian can figure out how to make money, because that honestly sucks. All right, I promise going forward, we have better news for Rivian. Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe told Reuters that retooling the Normal, Illinois factory resulted in a 35% drop in cost of materials for the Rivian delivery vans. And he also said, although he didn't give exact numbers or percentages, that there was a similar cost savings on the other product lines as well. So we'll say between 25 and 35%, because if it was a better number, I would imagine he would have led with the better number. This is good news, because in Q4 of 2023, Rivian was losing $43,372 per vehicle. In Q1 2024, Rivian lost $38,784 per vehicle. So this is not a cheap business to run when you're losing $40,000 every single vehicle. It'll be interesting to see what the number looks like in Q3 2024. I would hope that it's significantly less, if not the company's actually profitable with all these layoffs and retooling and restructuring. I don't think we should expect too much in Q2 of 2024, simply because they shut down for a month and then they brought the factory back up. I don't think that number is going to be great. So I would expect to see the changes that they made this quarter, next quarter in Q3 2024. All right. And finally, Rivian and Volkswagen Group are partnering on a joint venture to create software for future EVs. It doesn't sound like this joint venture is going to be like another business like Sony and Honda have Ophelia. And that's a company, that's a car company that is neither Sony nor Honda, but both companies are working on it. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. It sounds like all of the investment money is going to come from Volkswagen, and all of the actual hard work is going to come from Rivian. Although this joint venture will be headed up from representatives from both companies, and that will manage the venture. So we'll see what happens there on that side of things. I actually listened to the announcement, and the audio for like the first 12 minutes was fine, and then after that, it just kept cutting out to the point where you couldn't really keep a good thread of the conversation just because there was so much missing from it. So I shut it off at about 20 minutes. So I didn't actually hear all of it. But this makes a lot of sense because Volkswagen was struggling early on with software for their EVs, like the ID3 and the ID4. They were building them, and with the ID3s in particular, they weren't able to ship them because the software was just this big kludge of disappointment and sadness. Like, it sucked. The ID4 has had some software issues, but has largely, and the ID3, I would put these two together, over time has gotten better, but it's not great. VW Group did have a subsidiary company to help develop the software that would run on their vehicles. And actually, when I was at CES, there was a big booth for this new company, and they were trying to get software engineers to come in and join. Well, they ended up laying off a lot of those people, and I don't know if they've completely shuttered their software division from that company, or if there's still people hanging around. But it didn't work out. Let's just put it that way. So VW Group will get access to Rivian's electrical architecture and software. And to kind of highlight what a good deal this was for Volkswagen, RJ mentioned in the call with their new updates to the Rivian R1 platform, the Gen 2 R1 platform, which is the ones that they're building after the retooling of the factory. Like, Rivian was actually able to remove a lot of the robots and tooling machines and all that stuff. They were able to simplify the production process. But they were also able to reduce the ECUs, electronic control units, from 17 down to 7. Now, ECU is a generic name of a device that controls one or more electrical systems. I'm sure every car platform has ECUs that do different things. Just know that it controls an electrical system, and then it sends that information back to whatever's controlling everything else. So, that's just an example of Rivian's good engineering right there. As far as the companies goes, both companies are still going to be independent. They're not, they're only teaming up for the software. They're not doing anything else in that regard. So Volkswagen's going to get some of Rivian's technology. Rivian's going to get some of Volkswagen's money. Volkswagen Group will invest up to $5 billion in Rivian. So in a few days, they're going to get $1 billion. And then over the next 2 years, they're going to get an additional $4 billion, but they need to meet certain benchmarks. And there was a bunch of other stuff that Claire, who's the CFO, McDonough, I think is her last name, there's a couple of things that, it was more complicated than you have to meet these benchmarks, but, we're not a financial podcast. But anyway, they have the potential of getting $4 billion over the next 2 years. So Rivian is getting a nice cash infusion, which will actually help them in producing the R2. And the final product of this joint venture, which is the software and electrical architecture, will actually start shipping in Rivian's R2 EV in 2026. So good news for Rivian, good news for Volkswagen. And I have one more VW story that really doesn't have anything to do with this joint venture, but it's just worth mentioning. Volkswagen is going to add ChatGPT's voice assistant to the ID4 and some of their other models coming soon. I love this. One of my favorite features of ChatGPT is the voice assistant. So I'll go on the app, I'll activate the voice assistant, and I'll just chat with it. I've had several problems solved by talking to it. One of the problems with my other podcast, Beyond the Post, is I couldn't figure out something that I needed to do in Final Cut. So one day I was in the car. Before I got in the car, I turned on the voice assistant. I got in the car and I was chatting back and forth while I was driving with the voice assistant on how to solve this problem. And the voice assistant actually came back with an answer. I got home, I tried it, and it worked. So it was pretty amazing. I've used it for other things as well. So I would highly encourage people, if you've not ever used the ChatGPT voice assistant and you're working through some sort of problem that you just can't solve, give it a try, because it actually works pretty well. All right, everybody, that is it for me today. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Let's see, next week we have the 4th of July here in the US, but I'll still put out an episode. I'm not exactly sure how much news is going to be that week, but we'll put out an episode. All right, everybody, thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to you on Friday.